The Silent Meridian. Chapter 1. The Shackleton Margin. The moon did not feel empty. It felt unfinished. Commander Elena Navarro stood at the rim of Shackleton crater and let the horizon curve beneath her boots. The sunlight here did not rise or set in the way it did on Earth. It skimmed the surface in a shallow arc, circling slowly along the jagged ridge lines, never climbing high, never disappearing entirely. The shadows were long and permanent, like black oceans frozen mid-wave. Her suit telemetry scrolled steadily in the corner of her visor. Internal pressure nominal, oxygen 98%, CO scrubbers optimal, battery 87%. The regolith beneath her boots was powder fine, electrostatically adhesive, and older than vertebrate life on Earth. Each step sent slow, graceful arcs of gray dust, drifting in ballistic curves before settling back in silence. Seismic Array 3 transmitting cleanly. Imani O, you reported from the rover, her voice flattened slightly by short-range radio compression. Subsurface profile uniform to 58 meters. Dr. Marcus Hale crouched beside the radar sled, brushing a layer of regolith from the antenna grid before dragging it forward another meter. The sled hummed faintly through the suit contact points. Uniform basalt, he murmured. Impact melt. Fractured. Predictable. He stopped moving, except here. Elena turned. The radar projection on her visor updated automatically through shared telemetry. The layered echoes of basalt and impact breccia suddenly terminated in a sharp boundary. A volume embedded within the crater wall. Rectangular? The geometry was unmistakable. Artifact? Connor Reeves suggested from the rover cockpit. Multipath interference from the crater rim. Hale shook his helmet slowly. Artifacts don't have 90-degree boundaries. The anomaly measured approximately 30 meters wide and at least 10 meters tall, extending deeper than radar penetration could resolve. Elena magnified the corresponding visual region. A pale slab sat partially exposed in the inner crater wall, smoother than the surrounding rock, its surface catching light differently, not reflective, but absorbing. How old is this crater? Elena asked. 3.2 billion years, give or take, Hale replied automatically, meaning that slab has been there at least that long. Hale hesitated, or it predates the impact and survived it. Silence filled the comm loop. The moon was supposed to be geologically honest. There were no trees to conceal, no erosion by rain, no tectonic recycling. What you saw was what had been. Log coordinates, Elena said. Tag as subsurface irregularity. We'll transmit to Earth once the high gain is free. She forced herself to look away. They were here for water ice mapping and regolith electrolysis trials. Artemis now Midua still. As they drove away, the pale slab remained in her peripheral awareness like something patient. Chapter 2. The Storm Without Weather. The micrometeoroids arrived without thunder. There is no atmospheric friction on the moon, no fire trails, no warning. The first impact struck the rover's hull at nearly 20 kilometers per second. The vibration punched through the chassis and into their spines. Connor swore instinctively. Impact! Cooling loop B breach! Warning lights cascaded across the rover console. Imani's fingers moved quickly across the diagnostics display. External radiator punctured. Fluid loss rapid. Thermal control compromised. Before Elena could respond, a second impact tore across the upper assembly. The high-gain antenna vanished in a cloud of metallic fragments. Telemetry dropped to local line in sight. Earth went silent. A third strike punched through an external conduit feeding the life support manifold. A hiss followed, soft but deadly. We've got pressure decay, Imani said. Her voice remained steady, but Elena heard the tightening beneath it. Internal loss 1% every 3 minutes. Connor cut propulsion power immediately. Without proper cooling, The lithium-sulfur battery stack would overheat under load. "How long before thermal runaway?" Elena asked. 30 minutes at current draw, Connor replied. Longer if we shut down mobility. They were 15 kilometers from the lander. On this terrain, that meant 5 hours on foot. Suit co-scrubbers were rated for 4 under moderate exertion. Connor ran the math aloud. If we attempt full return, scrubbers saturate before we reach the ascent module. If we stay in the rover, battery overheats and we cook. Hale turned his helmet toward the crater wall behind them. The anomaly. Elena closed her eyes briefly inside her visor. It's less than a kilometer, Hale continued. If it's a lava tube entrance, we get radiation shielding and thermal stability. We can power down and stretch consumables. It's a radar irregularity, Connor countered. Not a shelter. It's geometry, Hale replied. Not geology. The pressure inside the rover ticked down again. Silence stretched between them. Elena looked at the Earth hanging above the horizon. No answer from mission control. No guidance. Only them. We go to the anomaly, she said. They shut down the rover to minimal survival mode and exited into the gray silence. Chapter 3. The Seam. The walk felt longer than a kilometer. Regolith shifted underfoot, sliding like dry snow, but with none of snow's compressive integrity. Every step required controlled effort. Connor's oxygen consumption increased steadily as exertion spiked. By the time they reached the pale slab embedded in the crater wall, his secondary tank read 12%. Up close, the structure erased doubt. It was not rock. Its surface was smooth but not polished. It absorbed light rather than scattering it. There were no impact craters on it. None, despite the surrounding wall being pitted by billions of years of micrometeoroid strikes. Hale ran his gloved hand along the boundary. There's a seam here. Imani knelt beside him and brushed away regolith that had collected along a faint indentation. An elliptical depression revealed itself, subtle but deliberate. Connor leaned against the wall heavily. Please tell me that's a door. Elena placed her gloved palm into the depression. Nothing. Imani joined her. Together they applied steady, increasing pressure. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then a faint vibration resonated through the surface. A vertical line appeared where none had been visible. The slab slid laterally, not grinding, not scraping. It moved as if nearly frictionless. Connor's oxygen dropped to 9%. Move, Elena ordered. They stepped into darkness. The panel closed behind them with a muted, heavy sound transmitted through structure rather than air. A second barrier stood before them. The chamber was small and closed. Connor's oxygen dropped to 7%. Airlock, Imani whispered. A low vibration began beneath their boots. Imani's HUD spiked. Pressurizing 0 atmospheres. 0.3, Connor sagged. 5%. Hold, Elena said firmly. 0.3, Connor sagged. 5%. Hold, Elena said firmly. 0 atmospheres. Stabilizing. The inner wall slid aside. Cool. Still air flowed inward. Connor's oxygen hit 3%. Inside, Elena ordered. They crossed the threshold. Behind them, the outer barrier sealed. The moon disappeared, and for the first time since stepping onto the surface, they were not in vacuum. Chapter 4. The First Breath. The transition from the absolute silence of the lunar vacuum to the enclosed atmosphere of the structure was a sensory shock. For months, their world had been defined by the hum of fans and the smell of recycled sweat inside their suits. Now, for the first time, they were in a space that had its own character. Imani's suit sensors were screaming with data. She held her wrist terminal up, her eyes darting across the scrolling telemetry. Nitrogen 78%. She read aloud, her voice trembling with a mix of professional focus and raw adrenaline. Oxygen 21. Argon trace. 2 levels are lower than our own rover's baseline. Pressure is holding steady at 0 atmospheres. Temperature is 12 degrees Celsius. Connor was leaning against the smooth, matte gray wall, his chest heaving. His HUD was flashing, a rhythmic crimson warning. Oxygen critical 1%. Commander, he rasped. His voice was thin, the sound of a man breathing the last of a dying tank. Elena didn't hesitate. She stepped toward him, her gloved hands reaching for his helmet-locking ring. Imani toxins. None detectable. No methane, no sulfur, no volatile organics. It's Earth standard, Elena. It's cleaner than the air in Houston. Microbial. Negative on the rapid scan, but our sampling is limited. If there's something ancient in here, we won't know until it's too late anyway. Elena looked Connor in the eye through his gold-tinted visor. We're doing this. On my mark. 3, 2, 1. She twisted the ring. The seal broke with a sharp, pressurized pop that echoed down the long corridor. Connor flinched, his eyes squeezing shut as he waited for the agonizing expansion of a vacuum death. Instead, he felt a rush of cool, dry air hit his face. He inhaled. It was a deep, ragged gasp. He coughed, the sound loud and wet in the enclosed space. He opened his eyes, blinking against the sudden change in humidity. It's cold, he whispered. His voice sounded different. Deeper, resonant, no longer stripped of its bass by the radio. Smells like a thunderstorm, ozone and dry stone. One by one, they removed their helmets. The sensation was profound. The air was still, almost unnervingly so. There was no mechanical hum, no vibration of air-handling units, no hiss of vents. The atmosphere felt heavy, ancient, as if it had been sitting in this stone throat for millions of years, waiting for someone to disturb it. How is this possible? Hale asked, his voice hushed as if he were in a cathedral. He touched the wall. It felt neither like metal nor stone. It was room temperature, neither drawing heat from his hand nor radiating it. If this place has been sealed since the crater formed, the air should be stagnant. It should be dead. Passive chemical buffering, Imani suggested, her engineer's mind already deconstructing the miracle. The walls might be a composite that cycles could back into oxygen through a slow, non-mechanical reaction. Or there's a massive reservoir of liquid air beneath us that bleeds off just enough to maintain equilibrium. It's not a machine. It's an ecosystem. They stood in the corridor, 4 humans in white suits, their helmets tucked under their arms. They looked like intruders in a tomb that refused to decay. We need to move, Elena said, her command voice returning. We have air, but we don't have power. We need to find out what this place is before our suit batteries die and we lose our lights. They began to walk. The corridor sloped gently downward, curving with the natural arc of the crater wall. There were no lights on the ceiling, no glowing strips on the floor. Their headlamps cut through the darkness, revealing a space that was obsessively clean. No dust, no debris, no discarded tools. It was a clean abandonment. Whoever had built this had left with everything they owned, leaving only the shell behind. Chapter 5. The Silent Observatory. The corridor eventually opened into a vast, vaulted chamber. As their headlamps swept across the space, the scale of it became apparent. It was a dome, perhaps 50 meters across, carved directly into the lunar crust. The floor was perfectly level, made of the same matte gray material as the corridor. "Look at the walls," Hale whispered. He stepped toward the far side of the room. As his light hit the surface, a masterpiece of astronomical cartography revealed itself. It wasn't a projection or a screen. It was a physical etching, carved with a precision that defied human tool marks. It was a map of the local stellar neighborhood, the stars within 20 light years of Sol. Hale traced a line with his finger. "These aren't modern positions. Look at Sirius. Look at Procyon. The proper motion is off by several degrees." "How old, Marcus?" Elena asked. Hale pulled a small tablet from his suit pocket, cross-referencing the stellar drift. "Based on the displacement of the Barnard star vector. Elena, this map is at least 2 million years old. Maybe 5. 5 million years, Connor repeated. Before we even had stone tools, someone was sitting in this room, mapping the stars. One region of the map was highlighted with intricate detail. It wasn't Sol. It was the Alpha Centauri system. The 3 stars, A, B, and Proxima, were rendered with their respective planetary bodies, their orbital paths etched in concentric, overlapping circles. Opposite the map, a long, narrow aperture cut through the ceiling. It was a physical slit, perhaps 10 centimeters wide, extending from the center of the dome to the edge. Imani stood beneath it and looked up. "It's a telescope," she said. "But there's no glass, no lenses." She checked her wrist terminal, syncing it with the moon's current orientation and orbital data. "The aperture is aligned with the Earth's orbital plane," she said. "Because the moon is tidally locked, Earth stays in almost the same spot in the sky. This slit. It's designed to frame Earth perfectly as it moves through its slight libration cycles." Elena looked up. Through the narrow gap, she could see a sliver of the black sky, and there, perfectly centered in the darkness, was the blue-white marble of Earth. "It's an observatory," Elena said. "They weren't living here. They were watching." "Watching what?" Connor asked. "Us," Hale said. "Or whatever we were going to become. They knew this planet was a candidate for life. They built a permanent, stable platform with no atmosphere to blur the view. And they waited. The realization was chilling. For millions of years, while humanity was discovering fire, building pyramids, and fighting world wars, this room had been open, its silent eye fixed on the blue world. "But why leave?" Imani asked. "If you go to the trouble of building a 5-million-year observatory, why pack up and go?" "Maybe they didn't leave," Elena said, her eyes falling on the center of the room. "Maybe they just finished." In the exact center of the dome sat a cylindrical pedestal. Chapter 6: The Signal. The pedestal was waist-high and made of the same gray composite. It was topped with a series of interlocking concentric rings, each engraved with symbols that matched the star map on the wall. Imani circled it, her headlamp reflecting off the tight mechanical seams. "There's no power source," she said. "No electromagnetic signature. It's purely mechanical. It's a clockwork mechanism of incredible complexity." "It's an alignment tool," Hale said. He was looking at the symbols on the rings. "The stars move. Over millions of years, the observatory's fixed aperture would eventually point at the wrong part of the sky due to the moon's orbital drift and the precession of the stars themselves. It's out of alignment now," Imani noted. "The Earth is in the slit, but the stellar coordinates on the pedestal don't match the current sky." "It's a test," Elena said. They all looked at her. "Think about it," Elena continued. "You build a base that lasts forever. You fill it with air. You leave a map. But you leave the transmitter, or whatever this is, out of alignment. It stays dormant until someone comes along who is smart enough to realize the stars have moved. Someone who understands celestial mechanics well enough to fix it. A cognitive key, Hale whispered. You have to be this tall to ride the ride. Can we fix it? Elena asked. Imani knelt by the pedestal. If I can figure out the base 6 math they're using for the coordinates, yes. We have the current epoch data in our suit computers. We just have to translate it. For the next hour, the only sound in the chamber was the soft click of the rings as Imani and Hale worked together. Connor watched the door, his hand instinctively near his utility tool, though he knew there was nothing to fight. It was a puzzle of the highest stakes. They were translating the movement of the universe into the language of an extinct or departed race. Almost there, Imani said. Her face was slick with sweat. I'm aligning the Alpha Centauri primary vector with the current lunar libration. She gripped the final ring. On 3, she said. 1, 2, 3. She twisted the ring into place. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a deep, subsonic thrum vibrated through the floor. It wasn't a machine turning on. It was the sound of massive, counterweighted stones moving deep within the lunar crust. Above them, the aperture shifted. It didn't just open. It adjusted its angle by a fraction of a degree, a movement so precise it was almost invisible. Outside, on the rim of the crater, the pale slab they had entered through wasn't the only one. A dozen other panels, hidden beneath the regolith for eons, slid open. Mirrors! Massive, parabolic mirrors made of a substance that reflected 99.9% of all incoming light. They caught the unfiltered glare of the sun. Inside the chamber, a beam of light shot down through the aperture. It hit a series of internal lenses within the pedestal, focusing the light into a needle-thin ray. It's a heliograph, Imani shouted over the rising hum. They're not using radio. They're using the sun. The beam shot back out through the aperture, a pulse of pure, blinding white light. Flash, 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 flash. It was a sequence, prime numbers. Then, the Fibonacci sequence. Then, a series of coordinates. It's a handshake, Hale said, shielding his eyes. They're signaling Alpha Centauri. They're telling them the observers have been replaced by the observed. The pulses continued, a rhythmic heartbeat of light that would be visible to anyone looking at the moon from Earth or from the stars. We did it, Connor said, his voice full of awe. We sent the signal. No, Elena said, looking at the beam. We didn't send it. We just turned the light on. Now we see who's looking. Chapter 7. The Meridian Between Worlds. The rescue came not from the stars, but from the dust. 18 hours after the heliograph began its rhythmic pulse, the vibration of a heavy-duty lunar drivetrain hummed through the floor of the observatory. The Artemis backup rover, dispatched in a desperate Hail Mary from the lander after mission control spotted the blinding optical flashes from orbit, had arrived. When the rescue team cycled through the airlock, they found Navarro, Hale, Okoye, and Reeves sitting on the floor of the great dome, their helmets beside them, watching the needle of sunlight dance across the ancient star map. They looked less like stranded astronauts and more like pilgrims who had reached the end of a very long road. The return to Earth was a blur of debriefings, isolation wards, and the overwhelming roar of a planet in upheaval. The moon blinks, as the media called them, had been visible to the naked eye. For 3 days, the lunar South Pole had pulsed with a light brighter than any star in the sky, a rhythmic heartbeat that silenced every conflict and dominated every screen on Earth. The scientific community was in a frenzy. The base at 89.45 degrees south was no longer a footnote. It was the center of the human world. Within weeks, a joint international task force was established. The air was analyzed, the mirrors were mapped, and the pedestal was studied by the finest minds in linguistics and mechanical engineering. But the most profound discovery came 6 months later. Elena Navarro stood on the observation deck of the Gateway Station, the orbital hub that served as the gateway to the lunar surface. Beside her stood Imani Okoye. They were both older, tired, their faces etched with the weight of what they had started. The deep space array confirmed the return, Imani said. She handed Elena a tablet. Elena looked at the data. It wasn't a radio signal. It wasn't a complex message of peace or a manifesto of alien intent. It was an echo. 4 light-years away, in the Alpha Centauri system, a series of mirrors had unfolded. They were massive kilometers across, and they were positioned to catch the light of their own stars and reflect it back toward Sol. "It's a mirror image," Imani whispered. "They're reflecting our own Fibonacci sequence back at us. It's a confirmation of receipt." "How long?" Elena asked. "The light took 4 years to get there, and 4 years to get back. But the mirrors, they were already there. Elena, they were waiting for the moon to blink. The moment our light hit them, they opened." Elena looked out the viewport at the moon. From this distance, it looked small, fragile, a barren rock caught in Earth's gravity. But she knew better now. She knew it was a silent sentinel, a meridian between the infancy of a species and its maturity. "They aren't coming here, are they?" Elena asked. "Maybe not," Imani said. "Maybe they don't need to. They just wanted to know if we were finally looking up." Elena watched the moon, and for a moment, she could almost see the pale slab in the crater wall, the invisible airlock, and the room where the air smelled like a thunderstorm. Humanity had spent its entire history wondering if it was alone. They had searched for signals in the radio noise of the universe, looked for life in the chemical signatures of distant atmospheres, and sent golden records into the void. But the answer hadn't been in the distance. It had been right there, 3 days away, hidden in the shadow of a crater. The universe hadn't spoken to them in a language they had to decode. It had simply waited for them to find the key and turn the light on. The Silent Meridian had been crossed. The observed had become the observers. And as Elena watched, a tiny, brilliant speck of light appeared on the dark limb of the moon. A reflection of a reflection. A handshake across the stars. The porch light was on, and for the first time in history, someone was home. Epilogue: The Long Watch. 5 million years ago, a ship had lingered in the Earth-Moon system. It hadn't stayed long. It didn't need to. The builders had seen the potential in the warm, wet world below. They had seen the chemical precursors of life, the stability of the orbit, and the promise of the genetic code. They knew that, given enough time, the planet would produce something that would wonder about the stars. They hadn't left a robot to guard the world. Robots broke. They hadn't left a radio beacon. Radio was noisy and ephemeral. Instead, they had left a room filled with air, a map of the neighborhood, and a simple mechanical puzzle. They had built it to last for eternity, a silent test of intelligence and curiosity. They had known that if the species below survived long enough to reach their own moon, they would eventually find the anomaly. And if they were smart enough to understand the stars, they would be smart enough to fix the alignment. The builders were long gone. Their civilization perhaps evolved into something beyond physical form, or perhaps simply moved on to other galaxies. But their architecture remained. On the moon, the mirrors continued to pulse. On Earth, a new generation of children grew up looking at the moon, not as a mystery, but as a doorway. The long watch was over. The conversation had begun. And though it would take lifetimes for the next word to be spoken, the silence was finally, irrevocably broken. Thank you for listening. If you like this story, please subscribe for more.